Hey guys! I recently reread one of my favorite short stories by Anton Chekhov called The Student, and I was thinking about the idea of a touchstone, which I can't quite recall where I first heard about this idea, but it has sort of stuck with me over the years, because in the more literal world of metallurgy, a touchstone is often a piece of jasper or schist that is often used to test alloys of gold. And so a jeweler would rub a gold item against a jasper stone to leave a visible streak. They would then apply a specialized acid solution to the streak and measure how quickly the metal would dissolve. This would allow them to then discern the carat purity of the alloy. So one of my favorite stories by Chekhov, The Student, is one of my favorite touchstones if I had to pick one in the world of fiction. I think it describes an encounter with a touchstone in just the richest, most expansive sense of the idea. I learned that The Student was actually Chekhov's favorite short story, and I can well understand why. I think in many ways it is the jasper that reveals everything that is golden around us. So I'd like to talk about the short story for just a few minutes. It actually begins quite despairingly. A young seminary student named Ivan walks home on Good Friday in the merciless, biting, bitter cold. Hunger and fatigue weigh very heavily upon him, and the desolate landscape reflects the bitter loneliness within his heart. Ivan gives in to hopelessness as he realizes that the unrelenting tragedy of life is ageless and remains insoluble. A few lines from Ivan. И теперь, пожимаясь от холода, студент думал о том, что точно такой же ветер дул и при Рюрике, и при Иоанне Грозном, и при Петре, и что при них была точно такая же лютая бедность, голод, такие же дырявые соломные крыши, невежество, тоска, такая же пустыня кругом, мрак, чувство гнета. Все эти ужасы были, есть и будут. И от того, что пройдет еще 1000 лет, жизнь не станет лучше. И ему не хотелось домой. Ivan says, and now shrinking from the cold, he thought that such a wind had blown in the days of Rurik and in the time of Ivan the Terrible, and in their time there had been just the same level of desperate poverty and hunger, the same thatched roofs with holes in them, the same misery, ignorance, the same desolation everywhere, the same darkness, the same feeling of oppression. All of these had existed, did exist, and would continue to exist, and the lapse of 1,000 years would make life no better. And Ivan did not want to go home. So Ivan then stops to briefly warm himself by a fire tended by 2 widows, an older mother and her daughter. He then says to the widows, at such a fire the Apostle Peter warmed himself. He thinks, it must have been cold then too, an utterly long night. He asks the 2 widows if they are familiar with the story of the Apostle Peter, and when the older widow hesitates, he recounts the story from the Gospels. He tells them how Peter denied Jesus on the night of his crucifixion, and he speaks of Peter's grief once he realized the gravity of his betrayal. The older widow weeps openly, and her daughter stares at Ivan, racked in intense pain. Ivan experiences a sudden epiphany as he leaves their fire. He realized that what had happened 19 centuries ago had a relation to the present, that the women were not weeping simply because he had told them a touching story, but because Peter was very much near to them, and their whole being was, quote, interested in what was passing on in Peter's soul, end quote. Ivan's heart brims with joy as he appreciates that the past is, in fact, inextricably linked to the present, that all of the ancient truth and beauty lives on and continues to guide all human life. Ivan looks at his village, and he notices that it is imbued with new light. He is enchanted by the sweetness of mystery and a renewed happiness. I think we can all remember an encounter we have had that has brought us closer to something that is precious and authentic, something that we could only describe as numinous. These are the touchstones in our lives, revealing unalloyed gold. We must snatch them up while we can, because these small stones can readily slip away from careless fingers. I recently moved out of a city I have lived in for 7 years, taking so many memories with me and leaving so many others behind. I feel that the most formative years of my life have been spent in this city, the years that have taught me the most about grace and forbearance, about grief and love, about patience and bravery and faith. I leave behind what feels like a lifetime of learning and of growth, and I leave behind sincere gratitude for the life that I have lived there. I was thinking about what touchstone I could leave behind in my stead, something that could ground all of those who will follow in my footsteps down our hospital halls. It came to me quite quickly. There is one touchstone that has served me very faithfully all these years, from when I was a bubbly, eager intern to a much more chastened chief resident. There's a small interfaith chapel on the first floor of our old hospital, and there's a podium just beyond the entrance with a large journal laid wide open. There are countless entries, each faithfully dated and signed in a different way. It is a journal where patients and their families, hospital employees and staff, and all varieties of visitors have stopped by to write down their deepest hopes, most urgent prayers, and most somber reflections. Please, God, make my mom better. I love her so much. Or please, God, grant me strength to get through chemotherapy. Please, God, help my sister beat cancer. Some entries are signed with just initials. Others are signed simply Amen or your faithful servant. I used to read through the journal when I had a few minutes in my day, and it grounded me and connected me to people I may never meet. It opened my heart in the fullest of ways. Sometimes I would write briefly whatever weighed most heavily on my mind. I have inscrutable handwriting, and I took comfort in knowing that no one would be able to read it. I mostly asked for guidance and for discernment. I joined hundreds of other people who had stopped by in earnest supplication. The journals were exchanged at least monthly. They filled up that quickly. And so this is the greatest touchstone I could leave behind, a meeting between the past and the present, and an offering of communion between perfect strangers. We will never meet, or perhaps we have unknowingly passed each other in some hallway or on some street corner. I know the desires of their heart the same way our widows understood what was passing in Peter's soul. And if they can read my handwriting, they will know mine. I hope others discover this small little corner with its worn journal and appreciate the treasure that lies within. It is the story of all of us, and it continues to be written daily. So with that, a very, very hearty goodbye to Philadelphia. Thank you for all that you have given me.